As we have seen, pressure on telecom players to change their ways and operate in a greener way is mounting. Many telcos have committed to ambitious pledges to become net zero in the foreseeable future, but the paths to get there seem to vary. What are the main journeys undertaken by mobile operators and what are their current challenges to increase sustainability? To explore this topic more broadly, I'm now delighted to be joined by Stephen Moore, Head of Climate Action at GSMA. Stephen, it's great to have you here. So let's start with the current state of mobile operators. What is their progress towards net zero and how involved are they in sustainability-related initiatives?
So we've seen huge action from our members, mobile network operators, over the last few years. And to date, we have 64 mobile network operators that have committed to science-based targets. And these targets are aligned to limiting heating to 1.5 degrees. And what they mean is operators need to approximately halve their emissions over the next 10 years by about 2030 or so. And these targets include not just their scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, which is the emissions from their electricity use for networks and the operation of their businesses, but also their scope 3 emissions. And these emissions are much more wide-ranging. They are effectively the supply chain emissions, upstream and downstream. And operators have to set a target to reduce their scope 3 emissions as well as part of their science-based targets. So we've seen a huge number across the industry do this, which is incredible, quite frankly, because they are voluntary targets. And the number actually covers more than 60% of the industry by revenue. So we're actually seeing a majority of the industry now align behind this pathway, which will get us, we hope, down to net zero by 2050, which is our overall ambition for the mobile industry.
And speaking of concrete initiatives, earlier this year you unveiled an industry-wide drive towards a circular economy of mobile devices. Can you tell us more about the goals of this initiative, how many operators have joined, and what is the progress of the project?
Yes, this was a big moment for us. It was the end of the second phase of the project that we have been working on with around 30 mobile network operators over the last year and a half. The first phase of the project was the production of a strategy paper, which included a vision to improve the environmental sustainability of handsets. And this vision focused on making sure handsets lasted for as long as possible and also making sure no handset ends up as waste. This second phase of the project resulted in these targets, which we have so far got 12 leading operators behind. Those operators include Orange, KDDI, Safaricom, Singtel, and Telefonica as well. So a broad range of operators from around the world. And the targets that they've committed to, there are two of them. The first one is to collect back at least 20% of the mobile phones that they sell. The second target is around making sure that no mobile phone that they collect back ends up as waste. So all mobile phones are either reused, refurbished, or recycled. And the reason this is so important is because we also carried out some research that found there are 5 billion mobile phones that are sitting out there, lying dormant, unused in people's drawers. And we would like to boost efforts to take back these phones. And the reason being, there's a huge amount of valuable material in these phones. So first of all, if the phones can be put to good use, that will help us get more people online and experience the benefits of connectivity. If the phones can only be recycled because perhaps they're too old, then there are an estimated 50,000 tons of copper in those 5 billion phones. There's also 500 tons of silver and there's 100 tons of gold. Even more impressive is that there's enough cobalt in those phones to make batteries for 10 million electric vehicles. So we think that there is enough value that we should be looking at ways to boost take-back schemes to encourage people to take them out of their drawers and hand them in. And these targets that we've worked on with operators is a first step towards helping achieve that across the industry.
Those are really big numbers indeed. And as we know, the supply chain is the biggest carbon footprint contributor in the telco industry. How can operators better address this challenge and push for actual results from suppliers?
Yes, engaging with suppliers is really foremost in the minds of mobile network operators for a couple of reasons. The first reason, as you said, because it is such a sizable chunk of operators' emissions. It can be at least 70% of their overall emissions. The second reason is because they obviously don't have direct control over the supply chain. They need to work with suppliers, they need to influence them, they need to collaborate. And what we're seeing is more and more operators are doing this both individually, so actually speaking directly with suppliers, providing training courses for them on things like climate action, also encouraging them to set science-based targets. Some operators are actually setting this now as a requirement, a tender requirement for some of their larger suppliers to have committed to these science-based targets aligned to 1.5 degrees. And we're also seeing more engagement through some industry organizations, such as the Joint Audit Cooperation, which traditionally has engaged with suppliers more on sustainability audits, but is now engaging with them more on issues around climate, and the Responsible Business Alliance as well. So we're seeing these organizations get more involved in this and look to work together with their members, with the mobile network operators, as we are, to speak to suppliers and to support them in their journey, their climate action journey, so that they can begin to measure, report, set targets and reduce their emissions so that operators can meet their own science-based targets.
And in your opinion, what else should telcos do towards environmental sustainability?
Well, the list sort of never ends. There's always kind of a new boundary and frontier that we have to address, and I think the newest area that is being discussed for corporates is biodiversity and trying to understand biodiversity impacts. And there is a lot of work underway on this, both internationally through things like the task force to understand financial disclosures for nature-based impacts, the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which has created the framework for carbon reduction targets, is now looking at science-based targets for nature. And we are looking to address this by working with our members on this topic. So we spoke to our members. We have something called a climate therapy session that we do on a regular basis as part of our task force meetings. And in that therapy session, we asked them, what are your pain points at the moment? And they said, biodiversity. We're being asked about this. We're starting to see it being discussed. We don't really know how it applies to us as an individual business and to us as an industry. So we now have 30 operators that have come together to form a project group, and we're going to start to look at this, probably seeking some outside consultancy support to help us understand what our biodiversity impacts are as an industry, and then how can you sort of apply that to individual operators and what they need to do.
And apart from biodiversity, what else do you see as the current obstacles that might be slowing telcos down on their sustainable journeys?
One of the big things we see that our members tell us is access to renewable electricity. So this is really pivotal for them achieving their science-based targets over the next 10 years, because really it's the main way that we're going to be decarbonising the electricity use in networks. And network electricity use is where the bulk of our electricity use sits. And we see some fantastic progress in some regions. For example, Europe. I think we have, for European telcos, on average, more than 70% of their electricity use is actually from renewables now, because there's such an active market in Europe to be able to purchase renewables. But we're also seeing bigger challenges in other parts of the world. In actually many countries around the world, it's difficult, if not impossible, to directly purchase renewable energy because they don't have an energy market that allows that. So it's something we've got more involved with our operators. We published a policy paper calling on governments to increase access to renewables. We did that before COP27 last year in Egypt. And we're also looking to support some international initiatives and campaigns around this. So RE100 is one such initiative that some of our members are already part of, and we're looking to explore how we can support that, especially as we go into the next COP, COP28, which will be held in Dubai this year. And it's another opportunity to raise this issue with governments to say, we really want to push forward. We're willing buyers of renewable energy, but we need to improve access to it.
Definitely. And we've heard before that another challenge is around common methodology for telcos to calculate, monitor, and report carbon emissions. Is the GSMA working on a similar initiative?
Yes, again, this is something that our members fed back to us on and said they were having real challenge measuring their scope 3 emissions. So this is this whole value chain set of emissions, both upstream in the supply chain and downstream. So again, we brought together a project group to work on this. It actually took almost 2 years in total, but we have now published guidance on this. So it's specific scope 3 guidance on assessing scope 3 emissions for telecoms operators. It's something that we published in June of this year. We've just recently done a follow-up webinar where we have invited the supply chain and suppliers to come along to understand what is in this scope 3 guidance and the types of data that their customers, the mobile network operators, will be asking them for. So yes, we see this as being really pivotal. We think this quite technical guidance document is going to be very useful for our members. We've had some initial feedback already that it is, and it will help them with measuring this and also with some of their reporting. So most of them report to the international platform CDP, which is used by thousands of businesses around the world. And CDP asks for reporting on scope 3 emissions. So this guidance document will help them with that, and it will help them understand where the majority of their emissions lie and which of their perhaps key suppliers they should be focusing on, hotspotting their carbon emissions, and then working to reduce them.
And can you provide examples of mobile technologies that can help towards increased sustainability?
Yes, well, that's a really positive story for our industry because we are seeing mobile technology being deployed across all sectors to help reduce carbon emissions. Some research that we did showed that actually the potential support that the mobile industry can provide to other sectors, it's 10 times the carbon savings of the footprint of the mobile sector itself. And this is through lots of smart connectivity services. So things like smart buildings, where you have smart connected buildings that can monitor energy use on a minute by minute, hour by hour basis. And you effectively power down parts of the buildings that perhaps aren't in use. And you make sure that they are appropriately heated or cooled when they have occupants in and when they don't. We're also seeing smart technologies being used across the energy sector more broadly. So using things like smart meters to monitor energy use, also enable households to feed back energy. So we're seeing a lot of prosumers. So this is households that have perhaps solar panels on the roof. They'll be generating energy and they can sell that back to the grid. We'll be seeing this become much more important as electric vehicles become dominant and people are charging their vehicles at home. So when is the best time to charge your electric vehicle, and having coordination using mobile technology to understand, when demand is high for energy, so prices are high, and when demand is low, so prices are low, so that might be a better time for you to charge your vehicle. We're seeing many other applications across smart manufacturing, across the agriculture sector with precision agriculture, using things like drones as well. Lots of examples, more than I can name actually.
Well, it definitely sounds like there's a lot that can be done. There are a lot of challenges as well, but it's good to know that the industry is on the right track already. Thank you very much for sharing your views with us, Stephen.
Thank you so much.